So welcome friends, how are you? So today we are gonna see what if Naruto was revered by the whole world. Naruto X Harem movie. The universe was said to have started with a mighty explosion, a chaos followed by randomness and spontaneity. Stars formed with galaxies and celestial bodies and trail behind it. The randomness was soon replaced by order, to which currently our universe stands out now. But even all this had to have started from somewhere, like the mystery of the big explosion, so the people started to believe that the formation of these celestial bodies should be because of celestial beings, which they named as gods. But even the gods have their own history. Many people of different culture theorized this in their own ways. Japanese people believed in the existence of kami and shinigami. Greeks believed in the history that there were celestial beings even before the birth of the current gods, and attributed them in their own way. According to Greek myths about creation, the god Chaos was the foundation of all things. From chaos came Gaia, earth, the bottomless depth of the underworld, known as Tartarus. And Eros, love, Eros, the god of love, was needed to draw divinities together so they might produce offspring. Chaos produced night, while Gaia first bore Uranus, the god of the heavens, and after him produced the mountains, sea, and gods known as Titans. The Titans were strong and large, and they committed arrogant deeds. The youngest and most important Titan was Cronus, Uranus and Gaia. Aimed to personify heaven and earth. Uranus tried to block any successors from taking over his supreme position by forcing back into Gaia the children she bore, but the youngest child, Cronus, thwarted his father. After wounding his father and taking away his power, Cronus became ruler of the universe, but Cronus, in turn, feared that his own son would supplant him. When his sister and wife Rhea gave birth to offspring Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, Cronus swallowed them. Only the youngest, Zeus, escaped this fate because Rhea tricked Cronus. She gave him a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes to swallow in place of the baby. Zeus along with a mighty assistance forced his father, Cronus, to disgorge the children he had swallowed, with help from the mighty celestial being, and armed with the thunderbolt, Zeus made war on Cronus and the Titans, and overcame them in one-sided battle. Because of the unknown celestial being's enormous prowess, Zeus ruled the sky, his brother Poseidon ruled the sea, and his brother Hades. The underworld, their sister Hestia ruled the hearth, and Demeter took charge of the harvest. Zeus married his sister Hera, who became queen of the heavens, and guardian of marriage and childbirth. Among their children was Ares, whose sphere of influence was war. 12 major gods and goddesses had their homes on Mount Olympus, and were known as the Olympians. 4 children of Zeus, and 1 child of Hera joined the Olympian gods Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Demeter, and Ares. Zeus' Olympian offspring were Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, and Athena. Hera gave birth to Hephaestus. All these facts were in fact believed by the people to be only myths that came out of some wild imagination and fantasy. They were nothing more than a hope and belief for a human's faith, but what if they weren't just a myth? This world was sure a weird place. Some people merely believed it to be just a long dream, and through death, we would wake up from this dream. Humans have been gifted various things which was believed to be graced from the gods, some by accident like fire and some on purpose. Jubi no Okami was believed to be one such gift, or later translated as a curse from the gods. But then, to rectify this mistake, a god himself was said to have descended from the heavens in the form of the popularly mythical figure, the 6 paths of sage. And he saved the world from the curse and in turn gave the humanity a gift, the gift of chakra, and thus started a system of shinobi world. As the generations passed by, 6 paths of sage was long forgotten in the chapters of history, merely remaining as a mythology. Some say that a limb being cut off is the most painful experience, while others say fatal injury to head takes away that compliment, but a certain Riti thought otherwise. Oh God, it hurts. Aya Kushina screamed as she lay on the solid rock bed and tried to survive the pain she was undergoing through. Minato looked worried as he looked at his wife, concern clear in his eyes. Is she alright? I've never seen Kushina in so much pain. Just shut up and concentrate on the seal. Bawako retorted at the 4th Hokage. But, Shes. They are the Yondaime Hokage for God's sake. She yelled at him, women's are stronger than men so they can bear the pain. The bead of sweat ran down the face of Minato as concentrated the seal on his wife's abdomen as Kyuubi tried to break free. Aya. Kushina screamed as she tried to go through the labor, while simultaneously trying to suppress Kyuubi's attempt to get out of the seal. RRRRRRNNNNN. Kushina's muffled as she felt Naruto being suctioned out of her womb as she cried in pain. The head's out. Almost there, Kushina. Bawako shouted as she helped the baby the womb to get it to the outside world. Keep going, Kushina-san. The assistant medic encouraged. Naruto, get out. Kyuubi, you stay inside. Minato shouted as he concentrated hard on the seal. RRRHHH, Kushina voiced out as she gave one final push, her son finally free of his mother's uterus. Cries from the infant filled the cave where Kushina was going through labor. Here Minato thought as his face contorted into that of shocking happiness. The Wacko ordered Taji to get some hot water. Kushina panted, trying to rest after spasming through the labor pain. The infant's cry echoed through the cave as he was washed clean of his mother's bodily fluids, and Bawako announced with joy, "Congratulations, it's a healthy baby boy." Haha, Minato wiped away the tears of joy that escaped his eyes. "Look at me, I'm a father." Bawako held the blanket-covered Naruto and carried him up next to his mother's head as he continued to cry. Kushina, to shed tears, gazed at her child in happiness. "Naruto, I finally get to meet you." Bawako took Naruto away to completely wash away the fluids that laced the infant's body. Minato spoke, "Okay Kushina. I know you're exhausted from the birth, but we've got to get the Kyuubi completely sealed. Right?" Kushina panted with smile. Just as he was about to take care of the seal on his wife's abdomen, two thuds of bodies crashing to the floor resonated through the cave, which snapped Minato from his concentration. "Bawako-sama. Taji." Minato cried out. They both looked over to see Bawako and the Anbu on the floor, blood pooling from under them. Looking up, their eyes widened in horror at the scene before them. A cloaked man held their baby Naruto in his arms, positioning the kunai in a manner that would end the infant's life in split seconds. "Yandame Hokage Minato, stay away from the Jinchuriki or your minute old son's life ends here," threatened the masked man. "How did he get through the barrier? Who the hell is he?" Minato gazed at the cloaked man in worry. He was about to move forward when Kushina screamed, causing him to look down on the seal, which was slowly disintegrating as Kyuubi tried to force its way out of the seal exposed on her stomach. "Kushina," he shouted, "shit. The seal's still weak." "Get away from the host," the man said once more, "or don't you care what happens to the brat?" "Wait. See, calm down." Minato shouted in dread as he worried for his son's safety. "You're the one who needs to calm down, Minato. I am perfectly calm at my place," the man said just before he threw Naruto in the air. "Naruto!" Kushina shouted in panic while Minato narrowed his eyes. Before the masked man could do anything, Minato vanished from his spot using his teleportation technique and appeared on a wall behind the man with Naruto in his arms. The masked man chuckled, as expected from the yellow flash, "But what about the next one?" Minato looked down in alarm when he saw explosive notes attached to the bottom of Naruto's blanket. Minato recovered and acted fast as he removed the infant from the blanket and held it in his arms. Just as the explosive notes exploded, he disappeared to reach outside just in time as the house blew up, and Minato threw himself out just in time, crashing into the ground outside. Looking down in his arms, he sighed in relief. "Thank goodness Naruto's okay." He winced as he felt a stick of wood protruding his leg. Plucking it out, he threw it away and picked up his three-pronged kunai. "He forced me to use Hiraishin no Jutsu, and now he's after Kushina. I've got to hurry." He used his Hiraishin once more to get Naruto to another house. He then quickly placed his newborn son on an infant crib. "I'll be safe here," he mentioned, although he may have been trying to reassure himself. "Wait here, Naruto, I will be back with your mom in no time." The cloaked man transported Kushina to a different location, her arms being hung by the chains that were crisscrossed through 4 large boulders. The seal on her stomach had even been growing, up to her face and around her body. In front of her stood the masked, cloaked stranger who was just looking at her in a silent gaze. "What do you want?" Kushina voiced out tiredly as she felt the strength draining away from her. "I came to rip the Kyuubi from your stomach and use it to crush Konoha," the man answered. "What?" Kushina whispered in shock. The man, however, didn't pay any attention to her shock. The markings from Minato's Hiraishin no Jutsu that allows a person to travel from one place to another instantaneously, he commented. "I see Hess incorporated it into the design of your seal." The man looked up at Kushina, and now she could see him clearly, revealing a Sharingan eye through the eye hole, which shocked her even further. "Minato is always protecting you, but now I've gotten him away from you, and furthermore the seal is weakened after you gave birth. Do you know how long I've waited for this brief moment?" The masked man stared at Kushina, and through her eyes, he was able to make his way inside the seal, where the Kyuubi was bounded to a large bowl with stakes piercing each of its tails. He made eye contact with the Kyuubi as the beast tried to its best to nullify the effects of Sharingan controlling it, but in the end failed. Its large lid had changed into the pattern of 3 tornos, which eventually faded back in the background. The Kyuubi roared as it broke free from the chains that held it to the massive ball as it started to melt. Outside the seal, however, Kushina screamed as violent red bubbles of chakra exploded from her body, feeling like she was being burned alive as the Kyuubi was ejected from her body. "Come forth, Kyuubi no Yoko," the masked man shouted as he placed his hands in the seal. With a mighty ground-shaking roar of the tremors of which even the faraway residents of Konohagakure felt raising their goosebumps and sense of dread, the 9-tailed fox emerged from its host, reappearing in the real world once again after a century. "Alright, now head for Konohagakure," commanded the masked man to the beast. Ugh, the man turned around to see Kushina still alive, though having the beast extracted should have killed her. "Wait," she breathed out tiredly. "The Uzumaki clan really is amazing, still alive after having the Biju ripped from you, eh?" the cloaked man said as he looked at the Kyuubi once again. It's only fitting for the Kyuubi to kill its former Jinchuriki. The Kyuubi, unable to control its body, lifted one of its large claws and slashed down, intending to kill its former host. However, as its large paw smashed down at the rock she was on, a flash of yellow preceded the paw smashed place, and Kushina disappeared before she could be crushed under it. As the dust settled, Minato was crouching on top of a large tree, holding his wife against himself. You still have the Kairoi Senku, but it's too late, the man muttered, looking up at where Minato had landed with Kushina in his arms. Minato Naruto is Naruto alright? Kushina strenuously breathed out, her face devoid of life that was extracted out of her with a beast. Bags had gathered under her eyes, and mixed that with the sweating and weary look on her face it made her look slightly older than the young beautiful woman she was. Yeah, Hess alright, Hess in a safe place now, Minato answered, as he put on a bravado facade by grinning down at his wife to reassure her. Thank goodness Minato, you have to stop that man and the Kyuubi Hess heading for Konoha, Kushina warned him, well thankful her son was fine. Minato looked at his wife for a second before teleporting again. The man who had been watching raised an eyebrow behind his mask. He jumped again. Well, it doesn't matter, we will head for Konoha now, he said with a faraway gaze to the distance. Minato appeared in the same room he had come before with Naruto, only now with a tired Kushina in his arms. Why, asked a tired Kushina. It's fine, he set her down on the bed beside Naruto who was fast asleep. Yawer with Naruto now, he placed her so she was facing her son, and he smiled when she hugged him to her with a brilliant smile despite the situation. He had a bad feeling about tonight, and he prayed his family made it. Naruto, Kushina whispered, hugging her son to her and crying slightly. Naruto, she cried as she wrapped an arm around him as he lay beneath a blanket. She continued to cry as she pulled him close, and the side of his head rested against her own. Minato, thank you, go now, they need you, she whispered, getting weaker. Minato clenched his fists in determination as he rose from his place. Going over to the wall where a coat was hung up, he grabbed it and swung it around to wear it. Kushina looked over slightly to the back of his white trench coat that had red flames licking the bottom and the kanji for Yondaime Hokage vertically stitched on the back. They'll be back soon, Minato promised before he flashed away. The former Hokage Sandaime was reading report while smoking on his pipe when he felt sensation of nerve-breaking dread crawl up his spine. He looked out his window while exhaling a stream of smoke. The same man who had attacked the Yondaime and his family and extracted the Kyuubi appeared just inside the village's walls and used a summoning jutsu. Fuchius no Jutsu. The man exclaimed and unleashed the monstrous beast inside the territory of Konoha as it roared to the skies while its tail smashed buildings and crushed mountains true to its legend, causing mass debris to fly away in various directions. Some of the villagers, however, were not caught in the initial assault and looked up in pure unadulterated fear. Sandaime-sama. One of the Anbu appeared before Sarutobi. It's the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi attacked the village out of nowhere. Sarutobi, though, was in motion before the man even arrived, placing his battle-worn bracer on his right forearm as he responded, I know, I'll hold it back, gather and protect the civilians. Hi. The man acknowledged and disappeared as quickly as he had arrived. Sarutobi gazed calculatively at the giant beast while thinking, did Kushina's seal fail? Were all the safeguards we put in place really not enough? Minato appeared on the top of his head that was carved into the mountain. Looking around from the top of the mountain, he could clearly see the Kyuubi had just been summoned in the center of the village. The Kyuubi noticed immediately and turned his attention towards the Yondaime Hokage. So you noticed me already, he sighed. Kyuubi began to accumulate its chakra to its mouth, condensing it into a large and lethal ball of energy. I won't let you do this here. As the large orb of chakra was fired from the Kyuubi giant mouth, Minato spread his hands out with one of his special kunai held out horizontally as an invisible barrier formed in front of him, with a mass intricate pattern of seals suspended in midair as a wall, and absorbed the attack until there was nothing left in the forest not far from them. The same barrier opened up and set off an explosion that rocked the village from the distance and decimated the forest caught in the blast. I have pick a safe place to let that huge blast detonate, he thought, before picking the exit seal, 5 miles behind Konoha, away from the village. Down below the Hokage monument, people stared at the tailed beast as its beast ball vanished in midair. It's Minato. Narashikaku shouted as he boosted the confidence of villagers at the sight of their greatest Hokage. Let's go. Hiruzen shouted, getting ready to stop Kyuubi's rampage of destruction to his village as he received a chorus of haste from the nearby spectators Shinobis. Back with Minato though, he was preparing to teleport to Hiruzen's side, thinking, I have to tell the Sandaime what happened when the same man who had attacked him prior rose up from the top of his face on the mountain. Sensing the man behind him, Minato arched his whole body in rotator motion and tried to slash his Hiraishin kunai into the man's head, however it just phased through the man's head which made Minato's eye widen in shock. "You'll have to fight me and it's over," the masked man said as he grabbed Minato's wrist, the one that had gone through his head. Suddenly Minato's form started to become distorted and began to be sucked into what looked like some sort of vortex that had opened up from the masked man's eyehole before he could be sucked in though. He had flashed away, causing the man to be astonished for a split second, from which he recovered quickly. He used the Harem no jutsu again. "Hess fast, I'll have to suck him in quicker next time as soon as I touch him." Minato landed in a crash at a different section of the forest, with one of his kunai stabbing into the ground beside him. He grunted while standing up. "He dodged my attack but then solidified and tried to suck me in. What was that jutsu?" he thought before a swirling vortex appeared in front of him, and a moment later the same masked man appeared. "I won't let you get away," the man said as Minato began to stand up. "Can he use Jikiken ninjutsu too?" So that's how he was able to move Kushina so quickly. He was able to get past the Anbu under Sandame's direct control and get through the top secret barrier, and he knew that the Kyuubi seal would be weakened when she was giving birth. Not only that, but he knew how to break the seal and tame the Kyuubi. And he was able to get through the barrier around Konoha. "There's only one shinobi I know who could do all that," Minato summarized to himself, deep in thought before looking up at the man. "Are you Madara-cha?" he asked as the man pulled his hood back to reveal short spiky black hair. "No, you can't be," Minato rationalized. "Now that would be a bit far away thinking, wouldn't it?" the masked man remarked. "At this point, it's not important who you are, but why are you attacking Konoha?" Minato asked. "Oh, you know it's part of my plan to start a war to bring peace," the man answered. Minato narrowed his eyes at the masked man. "Either way, Hess no ordinary shinobi. He can control the Kyuubi and is better at Jikiken than me or Nidame combined with his dangerous ideology. I have to put a stop to him here, or else he may unleash something even worse than the Kyuubi. If I jump to the village, he'll follow me and make the battlefield even more chaotic. But like Madara, his Kuchiyus probably can't keep the Kyuubi here for long. I'll just have to trust Sandame to take care of the village. I have to stop this guy here." Suddenly the masked man charged forward. "There is no hope for you," he shouted as he unleashed a chain from both of his wrists that connected and hung behind him. As Minato charged at him, the man became intangible again, allowing Minato to phase through. The masked man spun around once Minato was behind him and pulled on the chain and wrapped Minato around the chest with it. Minato however chucked his kunai to a section of the forest and flashed to it, letting the chain to simply float in the air. The masked man's eyes widened slightly, though someone won't be able to notice. As Minato landed by his kunai, he looked back at the man. "His body, my physical attacks don't work on him. He only solidifies when he's about to attack. In other words, I'll have to try attacking when he attacks me, but 'tis risky for him to attack, and with the Kyuubi's Kuchiyus in mind, he probably wants to get this over as quickly as possible." Minato spun around and charged. It's all down to whose attack is a split second faster. As they both ran at each other, Minato threw one of his special kunai at the man, who let it phase through him. As they got even closer to each other, the kunai's end was almost all the way out the back of the man's head as the same man went to grab Minato at the shoulder. Minato at the same time had already formed a large Rasengan, and just as the man was about to touch him, the kunai slipped all the way out of his head, allowing him to vanish in a yellow flash, causing the man's eyes to widen as Minato appeared behind him and slammed the Rasengan down into his back just as he caught the kunai. "Gah!" the man shouted as he was crushed into the ground. "Shit, he jumped to that kunai," he thought in realization. "That's Ration level 2, Minato spoke as he looked down on the man. His eyes narrowed just as the Rasengan exploded, literally destroying the ground. Just after the man had somehow teleported away, the masked man appeared on a slab of rock nearby and noticed his arm fluidly getting separated out of his body, but before he could do anything about it, Minato had appeared in front of him and stabbed him in stomach with a kunai, causing him to spit blood into his mask. "He must mark me somehow," masked man thought. Minato then placed his hand on the man's chest, where markings suddenly sprouted from looking like the markings fit for a seal. "The contract seal. He is trying to break my contract with the Kyuubi," the masked man thought in astonishment. "Now the Kyuubi will no longer be yours to control," Minato exclaimed as, in the distance where the Kyuubi was wreaking havoc, its eyes that held the Sharingan due to its mind being under a Jinjutsu, reverted back to its red slit eyes. However, being tricked in such a way only caused its anger to grow. The masked man jumped upwards out of Minato's range. "You're the Yondaime Hokage. I'm impressed you were able to wound me and wrest the Kyuubi from me, but the Kyuubi will be mine once more. I am the ruler of the world. I have many means at my disposal." With that, the man vanished by swirling into a vortex. That feeling, Minato thought he was not joking when he said that. He gazed at the place previously occupied by the masked man before using Harem no jutsu to arrive back at the village where the Kyuubi was destroying most of the surrounding forest in a rampage. Though he was glad to see the Sandame had gotten the Kyuubi from the village somehow, biting his thumb to draw blood. He slammed it down on the ground. "Kuchiyus no jutsu," There was a large puff of smoke that soon revealed Gamabunta in all his glory. Minato looked over at the Kyuubi and clenched his eyes shut as he realized, or rather he simply just knew what had to do. Kushina, I'm sorry. Looking down at the large toad he told it, hold back the Kyuubi for a little while. Even I can't hold him back for long. Gamabunta shouted back up to the man on his head. It'll need a lot of chakra to send away something big like this. Minato shouted back as the Kyuubi prepared another large Bijidama. Minato suddenly flew through some hand seals, and a moment later the Kyuubi had vanished. Gariz and Saratobi, who had been below them all, had seen as Gamabunta was summoned, and then as Kyuubi vanished. Minato, where did you send the Kyuubi? He asked himself before seeing a part of the forest a good distance away explode in a dome of light, most likely from the Kyuubi's attack, over there. At the point where the Kyuubi had been teleported, Minato appeared by it with an exhausted Kushina in his arms, looking ready to just pass out at any moment. I have to set up a barrier, as soon possible, Minato said through gasping breaths of air. My chakra is almost gone. I can still fight, Kushina said as Minato placed her down on the grass. Suddenly chakra chains shot from her back and wrapped around the Kyuubi's tail and body, pulling it down to the ground. How she had enough chakra and strength to do such a thing amazed Minato. Wah! Wah! Minato looked down at the bundle in his left arm as his son cried, looking up as his wife was knelt on the ground, blood dribbling from her mouth, red-rimmed eyes from crying, and now chains erupted from her back. Kushina! He exclaimed as he saw cough up blood. He couldn't believe such a happy day had turned out to be such a nightmare. I guess we woke him up, Kushina said with a sad smile as she stared at her newborn son. Sorry, Naruto. Kushina, Minato whispered. I'm going to draw the Kyuubi in and kill myself, Kushina said with a weary look. That way I can put off the Kyuubi's resurrection. That's the only way the last of my remaining chakra can be of help to you. Suddenly a smile blossomed on her face. Thank you for everything, she said with closed eyes and a smile embracing her face. Kushina, Minato whispered with glittering tears that accumulated in his eyes sliding down his cheeks. You made me the Yondaime Hokage. You made me a man. And you made me this child's father. And yet he closed his eyes in agony. Minato, Kushina said so low that if he was anyone else he may not have heard her. Don't look at me like that. I'm happy you love me, and she looked down at her crying son in her husband's arms. It's his birthday today, and most importantly when I think about what her life would be like if I lived I can only picture happiness. Tears continued to streak down Minato's face as she continued to speak. If there's one thing I regret, it's that I won't get to see Naruto grow up. Minato looked down so his hair shadowed his eyes. Kushina, there's no need for you to die with the Kyuubi. Use your remaining chakra so you can be reunited with Naruto. Huh? Kushina asked with a confused look. It'll seal your remaining chakra inside Naruto with a Haki no Fukin Shiki, a trigram sealing style. Since I'm not the host I can use the Shiki Fujin, dead demon consuming seal. Kushina eyes went wide, but with that seal yowl. Here's one more thing, I can only seal half the Kyuubi's power. It's just not physically possible to seal it completely, it's not strategically feasible either. If you take the Kyuubi down with you, there won't be a host until the Kyuubi is revived, and the Biju balance will be thrown out of whack. With Shiki Fujin, dead demon consuming seal, I can seal half the Kyuubi's power forever. And the other half. He paused as he remembered Jiraiya sensei's words and looked down at Naruto. And the child of prophecy will be our savior. He looked back up and finished his sentence off. I will seal within Naruto, with Haki no Fukin Shiki, a trigram sealing style. Kushina looked at him with even wider eyes as blood continued to dribble down of her mouth. I know what you want to say, but Jiraiya sensei talked about the coming revolution and the catastrophes that will come with it. Today I realized two things. The masked man attacked you, he will bring catastrophes upon us, and this child is the one who will stop him. As the host, he will clear the way to the future. For some reason, I just know. Minato, but Kushina mumbled, unable to say anything as she helplessly saw Minato preparing to go through hand seals of the suicidal technique. But just as Minato was about to weave through the hand seals, Naruto's body started to glimmer with light encasing his whole frame, slightly blinding his parents. Minato was astonished at the sight that was transpiring before his eyes, as he was unable to interpret the implications of this phenomenon. What's this? What's happening? Why is Naruto suddenly glowing? Kushina too was equally surprised by the turn of events, but she started to worry for her son's safety because of his strange glow, and she voiced her concern for Naruto to her husband. Minato, what is happening to Naruto? Kushina took her son in her arms, in hopes of preventing any supposed harm to befall on him. I wish I knew, Kushina, but him too seeing such a thing for the first time, said Minato as he looked at his son in concern. Suddenly the light glowering over Naruto spread to Kushina too, as she too slightly glowed. Kushina? Minato called out in concern. But to Kushina and his own immense shock, Kushina's life-driven face came back to its normal state as Kushina felt her reserves filling back to its normal level, taking her out of her life-threatening situation. Minato, my reserves, they are back to normal. exclaimed a shell-shocked Kushina while Minato hearing this shared the same state of mind. Even Kyuubi, who was suppressed by Kushina's chains, was shocked and amazed at the scene. What's the meaning of this? No human-less infant should be capable of doing such a deed. And in a sudden burst the light encasing the body of the infant started to glow brightly and shot up to the skies, blinding the nearby spectators. Shit. What is happening? How is Naruto able to expel such high amount of energy? If this continues, then I don't think my space-time barrier would be able to sustain such high dose of radiating power, Minato thought as he wondered how such enormous power could be generated, much less his son being the reason of it. Sandaime and his fellow nins were currently racing towards the area where they last saw Minato teleporting Kyuubi to. The group consisted of clan heads that were one of the best friends and acquaintances of both Minato and Kushina. The younger generation consisted of the 4th student Kakashi, along with his comrades of his peers. They were currently making their way towards the area to assist their yondaime. All of a sudden they felt a sensation of tremendous power as they saw a pillar of pure form of unadulterated energy shot up to the skies. What is that? Is it Kyuubi? Asked Kakashi with fear lacing his voice as he felt the enormous wave of power radiating from the energy pillar which made the Kyuubi's chakra flare during his rampage in the village, a joke in comparison to this. No it isn't, I could distinguish Kyuubi's chakra very well, and this energy is nowhere near the hatred-defined Kyuubi's chakra signature, it's more like vast ocean of serene calmness and peace, said Sandaime, awed by the godly powers that was creating ruptures through the landscape. Okay, get ready everybody, we have to get to that place. Remember that Minato is in the range of that energy wave. Sandaime snapped everybody out of their trance from watching the pillar of energy. I chorused everybody in unison as they set themselves to reach the area of impact. In the meantime, the now surprisingly revived Kushina and Minato and even the Kyuubi were struggling to sustain through the tremors caused the energy burst. The tremendous wave of energy was literally ground shaking. Large chunks of land were being levitated from the ground as pieces of debris were floating around in different directions due to the tremors caused by blinding energy pillar that even pierced the skies. Minato. What is this? What's happening to my Sachi? Shouted Kushina through the debris crashing sounds for her voice to reach her husband. I don't know. I'm as clueless as you. Minato shouted back as he looked up at his mid-air hovering son in concern. But no one other than Kyuubi knew what was causing this phenomenon as the pillar of light that blinded the nearby spectators was gone as the infant Naruto's body was hovering high up in mid-air as if it's levitating in the atmosphere on its own command. He looked at the glowing floating body of infant with wide eyes. It can't be this energy, it's… Kurama. Kyuubi widened his eyes in shock at hearing his name from a familiar voice. The group that reached the area to lend their assistance to Yellow Flash were left stunned at view that their eyes were showing them. They couldn't digest the fact that all this unearthly powers that even made that of the mightiest Biju pale in its comparison was coming from a mere infant. Impossible, an infant can't generate such tremendous amount of powers. Fugaku, the Uchiha clan head, voiced his disbelief. Is that Sensei's son, said Kakashi, though his own spasm of shock. Now that they were notified of the information, they studied the features of the infant to see blonde hair of the glowing hovering infant, which left the group even furthermore stunned. As the effects of blinding light ended, Kurama was able to see a shadowy silhouette figure that by looks of other two observers was only visible to him, covering the entire frame of the mid-air, suspended glowing infant with short hair that spiked up in the front with two distinctive pieces of hair resembling horns. The ethereal figure appeared to have a shadowy cloak with a high collar. Revealing his necklace with 6 red magatama, he couldn't believe his eyes at seeing the one person he thought he would never see once again, who was a father figure to him. Old man. Kurama cried out. Minato and Kushina both snapped their heads in Kyuubi's direction in shock. Fuzzball. Have you gone nuts? This is my 1-hour-old son you are calling old man, Kushina shouted at Kyuubi, who growled in his response. He was considering of shredding her pieces using just his elongated nail, but refrained, taking into account of the fact that she was somehow indirectly his father figure's mother. No, I called him that because he is the one created me and is like a father to me, Kurama said with as much generosity he could muster, looking past her discriminations to him as she is his surrogate father's mother. What, shouted both parents in unison as Kushina decided to voice their confusion. But how could that be? You must be millenniums old, while my son is just hour past his birth. Minato remained silent as he somewhat came to a conclusion that made his eyes widen in shock. It's because your son is the reincarnation of the great sage who created me, the sage of 6 paths. The silhouette figure of 6 paths smiled at Kyuubi. Kurama, enough with the explanatories, I'm going to teleport you to a safer haven so that you couldn't be controlled once again, so that such events would not happen again. With that, light surrounding the infant's body spread out in Kurama's direction and enclosed around the whole frame of the 9 tails and in shimmering burst of wavering light. The glow surrounding the tailed beast flickered brightly, that for split seconds blinded everybody in the region. When the observers gained back their vision, they saw that the mightiest Biju Kyuubi no Kitsune vanished from his previously occupied space. Both the parents of their recent-born infant who was responsible for all the turn of events saw their son laid peacefully on the ground without any glow, sleeping soundly. Kushina ran towards her baby's side taking her son in her arms as she sighed in relief at her son's safety. Thank God. My son is alright. Kushina rocked her baby back and forth in her arms. Minato was just recovering from the shock that he underwent while his mind was replaying the words that Kyuubi spoke to them before his disappearance. He is the reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths. I knew it. I knew that my son would be the child of prophecy. A smile made its way to Minato's face as he along with his wife looked lovingly at their son, who not only saved their lives from a certain death, but also saved the whole Konoha town from destruction. While his parents were gazing at him, a compilation of words were running through the still developing child's mind that he somehow knew was his very own. Only I have the powers to cross the limits of this world and the outer world. In a landscape 4 and high above from the location of human existence, one could get a misty and serene view of a terrain which was smeared with unblemished white hue, adding to its limpid outlook. Many non-human creatures could be seen strolling through the immaculate streets without a thought for worry. In the center of this vista stood a resplendent, royal and regal-looking castle that no human could ever hope to occupy. Inside this castle, in a large grandeur courtroom, an imperial man was sitting on a magnificent throne placed on a high platform, with the others down in their own seats. The man sitting on the throne was a regal-looking person who had a silky shoulder-length blonde hair with slight spikes and bangs, which covered the side of his unearthly handsome face. He wore an elegant white robe with a long silvery furry tail appended to his right shoulder. He rested his head on his right arm's fist, which was supported on the arm on the throne. Currently his eyes were closed, but concentrated on hearing from his subordinates. We have to do something, my lord. The situation is getting out of hand. Your nemesis is slowly reigning control over the chaos that is being spread across the mortal world, said a bearded figure who had an aura of lightning and had a faithful yet powerful pet as an eagle by his side. This figure was none other than the god of the skies, Zeus. Yes, my lord, Zeus is right. Satan has become too much of a threat, and his powers at its peak even surpasses all of us except yours. My lord, you have to stop him before he becomes too much of a threat to the existence of the mortal realm, said a beautiful-looking woman with elegant long silvery hair as she radiated the power that defined the existence of life. She was none other than the goddess of life Marisha Ten no Kami. Many other gods who were present at hall were nodding at this as they knew that their supreme lord and the ruler of the universe was the only one who could stop this oncoming terror and apocalypse. The man sitting at the throne, now identified as the supreme lord, heard all this calmly while his eyes were still closed. Your almighty, we have to know of your decision, Marisha stressed again. The lord released a small breath as he opened his eyes and scanned the whole hall, which accommodated all the gods and goddesses who were waiting for his response. He raised his head from his fist and sat straight as everyone alerted themselves to be concentrated. Yes, I know about all these commotions that are taking place in the human world. That's why I had been planning for a while to reach a solution for this problem. Lord, what have you decided? Asked Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. The lord sighed again, which the gods and goddesses rarely got to see, and when he did, it always meant that their ruler was going to use last resort as the means of solution. I am going to the mortal realm. All the celestial beings were on an uproar as they heard that their lord was himself going to intervene in the mortal matters. They needed him here more to guide the universe and rule it. Silence. The lord roared, which resulted in the hall being quiet once again. But lord, we need you here. Besides, you had already taken an incarnation once. Hades, the ruler of the underworld, interjected. I know, but pandemonium has arisen once again, which calls for my attention. But lord. And besides, is there anyone who could be able to do this endeavor? Whole hall was silent at this, as I suspected. No one here except me could be able to take on this quest. Is there anyone who wants to object my decision? The whole hall was silent as all the gods and goddesses nodded among themselves, as they believed their lord always made right decision for this universe's welfare. Then it is decided, I would be the one to take incarnation, as only I possess the power to cross the limits of this world and the mortal world. Two pairs of eyes opened to reveal cerulean blue orbs that were scanning the surrounding, and when it looked up, it saw a mop of red hair. The infant who possessed these eyes tried to see the face of red-haired woman who was cradling him in her arms. When she looked down and saw that her child was awake, she smiled at him, which resulted in the infant smiling at his mother too. Kushina was remarkably recovering from her near-death state and post-labor pain that might have required her to get hospitalized, but here she was ready to stroll across the streets her village as she stepped out of Namika's mansion. Word had gotten immediately out after Kyuubi's attack that it was indeed 4th Hokage's son who caused that infamous energy pillar that shot up to the skies and was the one who defeated Kyuubi and made it disappear from the face of this earth. People had a hard time believing this fact, as no infant could possibly be able to create that much power, but when the majority of the shinobi section, Jounins and Chunins who had gone to assist their Hokage, accounted their experience of that night, people across the village were swayed to believe this fact. Some people started sprouting how their Yondame's son was a miracle child, and most started to speculate that the god himself descended to earth in the form of their Hokage's son to save them from the clutches of demons like the Kyuubi. It was for this sole reason that many people actually started to worship the infant whose name somehow leaked out and came into public's knowledge as Naruto. Various Naruto shrines were being set up, and people across the whole village and even some neighboring village were starting to flock to these shrines to worship their child-incarnated god and also get a glimpse of their savior. Kushina for the first time in her lifetime was left gawking when she was informed by Mikoto of this development, well, not Minato, as he was left laughing like there was no end to it, though he sometimes did wonder if his child was really a god, if Kyuubi's night was anything to go by. Though things were slowly starting to get exaggerating as various Naruto shops were being opened that was actually getting good business, an assortment of Naruto merchandises were being sold across the whole elemental continent as Naruto's fame was making its way across the entire shinobi world in a speed faster than Minato's Hiraishin could ever hope to achieve. So it was no wonder when Kushina stepped out of her house for the first time and put her foot on the streets, she and her son were immediately under the spotlight. Look, it's our savior. It's the child-incarnated god. The god has graced us with his presence. Kushina's eyebrows were twitching madly as she saw the commotion that was taking place at the sight of her son. These people were taking the definition of worship to a whole new level. This was madness. Naruto was giggling at some people's antics along with his mother's reaction. Seeing this, his mother let a smile grace her face. The sound of her baby's laughter was worth the entire world for her. She let herself stroll across the streets passing by various shops as people made way for their Hokage's wife and now more importantly, their savior and incarnated god's mother. Various shop owners were trying to bring the mother and son pair to their shops. Baby Naruto was looking around frankly in order to understand the situation of his surrounding. Various women were cooing at him, exclaiming how much cute he was and how their daughter would be a perfect match for him when he grows up. Now Kushina, having heard all these, was starting to fume at the casual way they were trying to set up her son to some harlots. She marched through the streets of the village with almost every villager following her path like blind devotees. Can't these people appreciate her now much needed privacy? In the end, Kushina sighed. This whole situation was getting rather troublesome. A certain Nara sneezed at this. She wondered how her husband was handling all this. Minato Namikaze is a man quite infamous for his cool temperament and calm demeanor. His cold and chilling emotionless eyes would bore into his enemy's soul and make them freeze in their path, and also on the other end of the spectrum, his warm bright smile could light up the whole day. He is also known for his shrewd thinking skills and ability to maintain calm in the moment of panic. For this reason, he has at occasional times been proclaimed as one of the calmest shinobi, but now, at this precise moment, he was on the verge of losing this title as he saw the commotion that was taking place in front of his eyes as he sat in his designated Hokage chair in the council chamber where a meeting was being held, and like every time, civilian council were doing their best job of screaming and howling like stray dogs at the top of their lungs. He is our savior. He's a god incarnate. He should be named the next Hokage. Hokage-sama, please let your son be betrothed to my daughter. The tick mark formed on his head as Minato finally, after ages for the first time, let his temper loose. Silence. The whole room was still to muteness. They never in their whole lifetime saw their Hokage ever being this angry and losing his calmness. They particularly knew that their Hokage was one of the deadliest ninja to grace this village, along with the Shadame and Madara Uchiha, so in a rare moment of intelligence, they decided to keep their mouths shut. Minato was not at all in his usual demeanor as he was glaring in all direction at all those people who were thinking of turning his only son into a breeding catalyst. The whole chamber was frozen as nobody dared to even twitch their muscle when their Hokage was showing his wrath. Finally, Shikaku of all the people decided to summon up some courage with a single thought of troublesome. Minato. What? Minato snapped toward Shikaku as he was rather in a foul mood. Shikaku cringed at the harsh tone that Minato used at him. Why am I doing this? Urged troublesome. You need to calm down, Minato. Word has already spread across the whole elemental nation that Naruto single-handedly made the strongest Biju Kyuubi no Kitsune disappear and saved both yours and Kushina's life at the same time. This made Minato scowl. If the information did indeed spread across the whole elemental nation, then his son's life would always be in constant danger in future, as there would be the threat of assassination from other hidden villages, so that they could eliminate a potential future threat when a child was able to accomplish such a feat of defeating the strongest Biju in his mere infancy. One cannot fathom to think what he could do in the future. Minato sighed in the end, he didn't know why, but he was easily rattled up when it came to the matter of his son. Maybe he was that much protective of his son, he hoped that his son's future won't be too much in danger. Shikaku was indeed right when he said that the word spread quickly across the elemental nations. It swept its way first through the Kase no Kuni, Wind Country, Tsuchi no Kuni, Earth Country, Kaminari no Kuni, Lightning Country, and lastly crossed the ocean to reach Mizu no Kuni, Water Country. Its respective capitals and the respective cages of this capital received this vital piece of information, but it seems that they were having a tough time coping with this news. The Wagakure no Sato, Tsuchikage's office. Inoki, the Sandaime Tsuchikage was sitting behind his office desk as he rubbed his temple to ease the headache he was suddenly feeling when he received the information that was quickly garnering fame. He didn't know why it always happened with him. The blasted 4th Hokage Yellow Flash was the reason why Iwa lost the 3rd Shinobi War, making himself an immortal enemy with Iwa. Now this fact that Kiroi Senko's son in his mere infancy defeated the strongest among the Biju, the mighty Kyuubi no Kitsune, and somehow saved both his father and mother from death when they were critically exhausted in chakra capacity, it seemed old age was really catching up to him, now because of the blasted Yellow Flash who fathered such a child. He had to make all sorts of plans so that Yondaime's son won't become a threat to his village in the future. Blast, he could already feel another headache coming. I'm too old for this shit. Kumagakure no Sato. The village hidden in clouds is known to be among one of the most peaceful village, along with Konohagakure no Sato. If you exclude the night of Kyuubi's attack and 3rd Shinobi War, then what the hell is left? People were going through their normal routine as shops were busy with chattering customers, and streets were buzzing with shuffling foots of the many civilians that came out on the road. Everything was so much calm and peaceful in this village. What? The voice roared across the whole village as everybody snapped their neck in unison towards the Reikage Tower from where the voice came. Reikage's office. The Yondaime Reikage was fuming in anger as a broken desk was lying in front of him, while 2 shinobi were busy cowering themselves in a corner of the office. Reikage was furious. Downright furious when he heard that a mere infant that to none other than the son of the only person who was faster than him in the shinobi world accomplished the feat of defeating the mighty Kyuubi no Kitsune and saved both his father and mother from the clutches of death, all the while he was just a hour-born baby. This infuriated him to no end. How could a child of such unimaginable potential take birth in a village where his rival was residing, and to add salt to the wound, this child is the son of none other than his rival, the Yellow Flash Minato Namikaze. Now there is no time to mope on this matter, as he needed to plan for the future and think how to get his hands on this power, while still being careful of the strongest shinobi of the elemental nations. When he thought of this, he could already feel his headache and fury building inside his body. Damn the child for taking birth in Konoha, damn Yellow Flash for fathering the child, damn everything. Blast you Minato. Reikage shouted to the heavens as he himself blasted through the window and dashed towards the forest to vent out his frustration, all the while cursing his rival for his misery. The Megakure no Sato. The person's spiral orange mask with single eye hole was meditating in an isolated room as he had his eyes closed, which slowly opened to reveal a revolving Sharingan. He wore a black cloak outfit with red clouds imprinted on it. He slowly stood up from his place as he walked towards a demonic statue which looked to be made of steel as it had its eyes closed. Suddenly the statue opened its eyes to reveal red devil eyes that could bore its gaze through a person's soul. Abito, he has arrived, you failed in your mission, the statue said in a deep growling devilish voice as its red glowing eyes bore its gaze towards the masked man as if it was penetrating through the mask. The masked man, now revealed as Abito Uchiha, in an act of submission, went down on one knee and bowed his head towards the statue. I'm sorry, I never thought that he would be able to use that much power while being a just born baby, Abito said, all the while keeping head down in front of the statue. You should have known it already, as I think I told you about him. His powers are unparalleled across the whole universe, the likes of which that even I can't fathom to think of, said the deep growling voice. Then what should we do? The statue grunted as if to indicate that it was thinking we should lay low now, even though Kyuubi is no longer in this plane. I could still get the portion of my powers back which he took away from me millenniums of years ago. Now go, plan for the future. My minion. With it the statue closed its eyes once again and became lifeless again. Abito stood up from his kneeling position as he raised his head to reveal his Sharingan tornos revolving violently. Hi master. The 6-year-old Naruto sighed as he walked through the streets of the most powerful hidden village in the elemental continent, Konohagakure no Sato. People were giving way to him as if he was the grandest of the royalty and nobility, as if the god himself was walking among them. And it indeed was the belief of the entire village populace that Naruto was an incarnation of God when he single-handedly defeated and vanished the mightiest Biju, Kyuubi no Yoko, while he was still in his infancy. This led to the entire village coming down in utter devotion and worship for the son of the Yondaime Hokage. believing he was a god in human form that came down from heaven to save them. The worship was to such a ridiculous point that they set up various shrines and temples in his honor and started to worship him there, and the belief didn't halt itself to merely Konoha, as it spread throughout the whole shinobi world, leading to increasing belief and worship of Naruto being a god. But along with all these, there were some serious downsides to this worship and fame. Naruto, while still being a breastfeeding infant, got so mind-boggling amounts of marriage proposals not only from the local populace of Konoha, but from across the whole elemental nation, that it seriously left both Minato and Kushina in a flabbergasted state. And what's exasperating is that these offers never stopped as Naruto grew. In fact, much to the growing irritation of both the parents, it only increased. Naruto once again sighed as he reminisced all these while still walking through the streets of Konoha. Even though he was merely a 6-year-old child, he held himself with such confidence and poise that it already paralleled with that of his father, and the way he walked, it was with such a grace that it just felt divine to the onlookers. Further leading to people's belief that he indeed was a god's incarnation. His appearance too could be termed as divine if one were to take a look at him. His hair, unlike his father, was a lot more tamed and looked silky, which reached down to his shoulder. He had slight spikiness to his hair, but even then his hair had this silky characteristic to it, and it glowed more golden than the blonde color his father had, which further added to his divinity. And his face had such a godly appearance to it that even Minato had to agree that Naruto, in few years, would become the most handsome ladykiller across the whole elemental nations. Naruto was currently trying to ignore all the looks of worship and awe that was thrown his way as he sighed to himself in exasperation. It's human nature to worship power which makes them feel secure and to loathe a power which scares them, he thought to himself, showing a rare level of maturity and wisdom for a 6-year-old child. Naruto-sama. Naruto turned his head to see one shopkeeper calling him out. Naruto let out a defeated sigh, knowing what was coming next. Naruto-sama, please enter my shop and bless it with your presence. No, Naruto-sama. Please enter my shop, I will give you everything in free. Enter my shop, Naruto-sama. And as if a forest fire was set, all the shopkeepers on either side of the street started to call out to him. Naruto just continued on his trek, ignoring the pleas of all the shopkeepers. He should have known, after all these years, that strolling out on the streets all by himself would really be a bad idea. I wish they would pester 2chan like this, Naruto then sighed to himself, but then again, it's just merely a wishful thinking. Naruto looked up from the streets towards the Hokage Tower, which stood out like a sore thumb out of all the infrastructures in Konoha due to its height. Wonder what 2chan is doing right now. Thud. 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 Minato repeatedly banged his head on his desk as all the Anbu that were present in the room sweat dropped at their Hokage's antics. Minato raised his head from his desk, showing his face having tears streaming down. It's just not easy to be the father of a child who has been proclaimed by the whole world as a god incarnate. He cried to himself as he looked at the huge tower of paperwork in total sorrow and despair, 2/3 of which was marriage proposals for his son. It was a miracle that his wife never got the gist of these proposals, otherwise he shuddered to himself as he thought what would entail if she ever found out. It was already bad that she would throw temper tantrums on all those who tried to pester her son too much, she was just too much overprotective. Hokage-sama. He quickly regained his composure as he looked at his assistant, who was standing in front of him with what looked like another stock of paperwork in her hand. He blinked once. He blinked twice. He blinked thrice. "Ooh." The cry shook the whole village as villagers came to halt to look at the Hokage Tower in confusion, but they shrugged it off and continued to do what they were doing, that was, worshipping Naruto's shrine. The black figure covered in hood blurred through the forest outside the Konoha village and came to halt at one of the branches of a tree. The person narrowed his eyes as he gazed at the village hidden in leaf in front of him. As he did this, 4 more figures landed around him in the branches of different trees and maintained their emotionless facade. As they along with their leader continued to observe the village, the place where they had to accomplish their mission. So, this is the village of the infamous Inochi, no Tentei the mortal god, thought the hooded figure with narrowed eyes, referring to one of Naruto's infamous titles. Surely the rumors must be exaggerated. There is no way any human, much less an infant, can make the strongest Biju vanish into thin air, a god in human flesh. Ha! The figure scoffed to himself. But that thought, he removed the hood from his head, revealing simple average face with black hair. He had a headband tied around his forehead, the headband of the Iwa village. Hiroku Taicho called out one of his subordinates, snapping him out of his musing. He turned his head towards the one who called him out, as the said person continued, "We must make our move fast, otherwise we could get detected. The Konoha village has redoubled its security after the attack of Kyuubi." Haruko Tento, the mission leader, nodded in agreement. "You are right, let's not waste any more time." As he said this, he quickly jumped away from the tree branch into the village, followed by his team, avoiding any detection through the help of special chakra suppression seals. He had to mission to complete in this village the mission to assassinate Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Naru-chan, get down here. Kushina cried out in worry to her son, who was perched up on the branch of a tree in the backyard of a mansion. Naruto had just returned from his trip to the streets of the Konoha when he suddenly had a bright idea of climbing up a tree and sitting on one of its branch. When Kushina first came up to the site, a sudden question aroused in her mind as to how a 6-year-old child ended up climbing such a large tree, but in the end, she shrugged off the question in favor of her worry over the fact that it was her son perched up on a high branch of such large tree, having the constant risk of falling off the tree and receiving some serious injury. But Ka-chan, I like it here. Naruto whined to his mother as he used his puppy eyes on his mother, which would have worked any other time, were it not for the fact that his mother was fretting over his safety. No, Naru-chan. Kushina shouted with worried expression, just stay where you are. As Kushina ran up along the tree and came up in front of Naruto, her son directed her a pouting expression at not being allowed to stay on the branch, and he continued to maintain the expression the whole time until he was put down on the ground, away from the tree. No fun, Ka-chan. Naruto cutely pouted, with crossed arms, an adorable expression, considering that he was still a 6-year-old child. Kushina was unable to resist the adorability of the child, add to the fact that she was the child's mother. Well, that sealed the fate. The blonde-haired boy was quickly hugged to death by his mother. Ha-chan. Naruto cried embarrassingly as he tried to pry himself away from his mother's death hug, but failing spectacularly. A few distance away from the Naruto's mansion were the group of Iwa ninjas, perched on different trees, hiding themselves in the shadows. The leader of the group had a frown of confusion etched on his face. The brat seems totally harmless and innocent. I don't know what threat Tsuchikage-sama sees in this child, he said to his group, with the same frown never leaving his face. It may be Kuroku Taicho, said one of his subordinates, but we must not forget that this brat is the child of our most hated enemy, the Kairoi Senku Minato Namikaze. If the child has inherited the same prodigious talent that his father has, then he could be a bigger threat in the future. Kuroku nodded his head in agreement to his team members' reasoning. Yes, you are probably right, that's why. Failure is not an option in this mission, do you all understand? Hi. All his team members chorused as quietly as they can, so as to not alert anyone. They were going to succeed in this mission, no matter what the cost, even if it meant by doing an intentional suicide, by invoking the wrath of Kiroi Senko. After fussing over her son for some time, Kushina went back into the mansion to prepare lunch for her family. Seriously, she frets over son too much. As soon as Kushina went inside the mansion, Naruto's entire demeanor changed from a playful child to a skillful observant as he narrowed his eyes at the trees where the group of Iwa ninjas were hiding themselves. In the trees, the leader widened his eyes when he saw that the child had known about their presence the whole time, when not even the Crimson Death Kushina Uzumaki was able to sense them. Shit. The brat sensed our presence. Kuroku cursed to himself in his mind, then, all of a sudden, as if a thunderbolt struck him, his eyes widened in realization, but how is that possible? We have special chakra suppression seals, using which not even the famed yellow flash could sense us, then how did this brat did? He thought to himself in panic as an odd sense of fear started to creep up his mind. If this boy had so much talent at such tender age, then it was no wonder that Tsuchikage feared this boy as a potential threat. Back to Naruto, he took a deep breath and let it out in a sigh as he looked back at the group hidden in trees and tilted his head to his side towards the exit of the mansion, as if indicating to his potential assassinators that they should take this outside the mansion. Up in the trees, the leader along with his whole gang narrowed their eyes at the golden-haired child. Is the brat up to something, the leader thought to himself, with a calculative gaze on his eyes. Either this boy is a crude tactician, leading us to a trap, or he is a brash idiotic brat who hugely overestimates himself. Either way, we have to see how this event unfolds. But that thought, Kuroku nodded to his comrades as they all silently agreed to follow the boy to wherever he leads. Down on the ground, Naruto smirked to himself as only one thought crossed his mind. It's you people who are overestimating yourself. After the whole fiasco of silent message exchanges between Naruto and his potential assassinators, Naruto led the said group to the one area where he knew he would have minimum disturbance, well, as much minimum as it would be possible before at an aforementioned time frame they would all be interrupted. Ah, the misfortune of being all-knowing, even when it comes to the matter of future, Naruto thought to himself, while sighing in mock disappointment and defeat. Kuroku, seeing this, smirked to himself as he thought how close to success their group was. Brilliant, even the brat knows that his life is now forfeit, he thought to himself, mistaking Naruto's mock defeated gesture as a sign as to how the brat has accepted his fate. Even still, he thought, I have to commend this boy. The level of maturity that this boy has shown is astounding. The fact that he is still a 6-year-old child is really frightening, he sighed to himself. While shaking his head in disappointment, too bad that he was born in Konoha. After some time of trailing behind the boy, they appeared in front of what looked like a forest. The forest of death. Kuroku frowned to himself, but it quickly turned into a smirk as he continued his thought. Seems like the brat really has a death wish. Kuroku smirked and nodded to his comrades, who were also smirking at their mission becoming all of a sudden more easy. They continued to follow the child until they, along with Naruto, vanished into the forest. Naruto's lips twitched in an effort to conceal his smirk as he saw all the Iwanins in front him. It was actually quite amusing to see them getting confused some moments ago over the topic that whether he was smart or an idiot. Now where is the fun in guessing one's emotion if I can just read their minds from the distance? Seriously, I am considering that it has more demerits than the merits it has. He suddenly gave a pause to his thoughts and started to chuckle to himself over the fact that he was now starting to complain on the abilities and powers that he possessed. Seeing the blonde-haired child chuckling to himself made Kuroku narrow his eyes in suspicion. Could the brat have really led them into a trap? He first wanted to snort at that thought. Seriously, a group high Anbu level shinobis being tricked by a 6-year-old child, preposterous. But then, he paused in his thought and recollected all the events that transpired today, the level of maturity and calm that this 6-year-old child has shown when facing a group of high-level ninja could even make some high-level jounins back in his village jealous. Could Tsuchikage-sama's fear really have some merit? Kuroku thought to himself as he eyed the blonde-haired child with some trepidation. Even his team members tensed themselves, expecting some kind ambush out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Naruto was still chuckling over his thoughts, not caring for the group of his potential assassinators in front of him. It was as if he was kind of lost in his own world. Finally, unable to handle the brat's melodic yet irritating chuckling to them, Kuroku exploded. "What are you laughing at, brat?" Naruto instantly stopped his chuckling, but the smile never left his face as he looked at the team leader, who looked agitated, and by the looks of it, the leader looked even more agitated when he saw the child's smile never leaving his face. Naruto merely raised his eyebrows mockingly as he smiled even more, in turn making the whole Iwanin group more agitated. "Oh, I was just thinking if I would be going to heaven or would I be sent to hell, considering the fact that I secretly eat sweet that was hidden in cupboard this morning when Kachan specifically told me not to, could that be considered a sin?" And as if to prove his point, Naruto put a finger to his lips, trying to project an innocent air, and he surely would have succeeded completely, were it not for the fact that the group of Iwa shinobis were fuming at the brat's nonchalant and non-caring demeanor. Kuroku took some breath and tried to calm himself as he motioned for his comrades to do the same, after which, he gazed at the blonde-haired child with narrowed eyes. "That's enough, brat," he spoke in a cold tone, with an icy glare etched on his face. "Do you know why we are here?" Naruto's smile never left his face as he responded to them in a calmness that should have been impossible for a 6-year-old child. "Yes, I know," he said with a slight nod. "I know that you people are here to assassinate me." Something about Naruto's calmness instantly put the Iwa shinobis at edge as they scooted closer to each other, as if in anticipation of a trap or an ambush attack. Kuroku once again narrowed his eyes at the blonde-haired child. "What are you hiding from us, brat?" he shouted at the boy they were assigned to assassinate. A childish but melodic chuckle rang throughout the area they were occupying as Naruto chuckled to himself while shaking head in mild amusement. He then calmly looked back at the group. "What can a 6-year child hide from a group of high Anbu level shinobis?" Naruto calmly said, with mild humor dripping into his voice. This instantly set the entire group on alarm as almost immediately, Kuroku blanched and took a step back in shock. What, how do you know we are all Anbu level?" he shouted in shock, with his eyes widened to its maximum limit, indicating just how much shocked he was. This boy was now definitely setting him and his group on edge with his calmness and analysis. It could also have been a mere lucky guess by the child that they were Anbu level instead of average Jounin or Chunin level shinobis, but with all that has transpired today, he can't help but think that this was no mere coincidence. In response, Naruto once again chuckled, something which he had been doing a lot today. "Well, if you ask me, then I would say that it would take some serious skills to infiltrate the most powerful hidden village and also take into account just who I am and who my parents are and the seriousness of this mission. I would like to think that your leader would not jeopardize this mission with nothing short of a team of Anbu shinobis." The more Naruto went into explanation and description, the more it left the group Iwanin stumped and shell-shocked. They now knew why their leader feared this child so much. It was because of what he could become with that immense potential that was already surfacing at the mere age of 6. Kuroku was the one who was extremely shocked to his core. He had totally taken a step back as he stared at the yellow flashes sun with wide shocked eyes and disbelief clearly written on his face. "Wow, what is he?" thought, when he noticed that his right hand was starting to shake. He quickly clutched it with his left arm as he tried to find out the source and reason why his hand was shaking so much, and when he did, it left him even more shell-shocked because the source of shaking hand was fear. Kuroku widened his eyes at this realization. "Am I afraid of this 6-year-old child?" He thought to himself in shock, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized the fact that he was indeed afraid, not afraid of this child, but afraid of his potential, afraid of what he would become in the future. He was snapped out of his trance by a sigh that escaped the lips of the blonde-haired child. Naruto merely looked at them with a smile, not the exuberant one that they had seen him wear the whole day, but a calm smile that is worn by someone who has accomplished something. It seems my job here is done. Hiroku frowned at his words. What did he meant by that? Anyway, he frankly didn't care. This boy unnerved him from the very start when he laid his eyes on him, and he just can't take it anymore. It was with this thought that he took out a kunai from his pouch and lunged at the calm boy with a loud growl emitting from his thought. His path was suddenly intercepted by a flying kunai that grazed past his face, just inches away. He suddenly halted at his place with wide eyes, as a sweat broke down his face. He tried not to shake in fear, with a good reason for that too. Because behind him stood the infamous Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze, wearing a cold gaze on his face, with a kunai in his hand, pushed against the Iwa group leader's throat. Surrounding them was the entire unit of Anbu, some of whom had already decapitated the other Iwa shinobis. All the Iwa infiltrators except Kuroku were being surrounded the Anbu force. Out of nowhere, a red figure blurred past the entire crowd and engulfed Naruto in a fierce hug that threatened to crush the poor boy and was holding the boy to its body as if the person's lifeline depended on it. Naru-chan. The figure who cried this out was none other than Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, who was holding her dear son to herself, all the while lightly sobbing to herself, as if the very imagination of her son's death scared her to her very core. Minato gazed softly at his wife. Never had he seen her so fragile before in his life. She had always been a tough woman who met the problem face on, but quickly he turned his focus back to Kuroku and glared at the Iwa group leader with a hell-freezing cold gaze on his face. "You tried to assassinate my son," Minato said to Kuroku in pure unadulterated rage in combination with a cold emotionless tone, a deadly combination for that I'm not going to spare you. Kuroku was by now shaking in an uncontrolled amount of fear that was coursing through his whole body, and there was a good reason for it too, because the one who threatened him was a man of legends, an army killer who was the first shinobi to be designated the SS class rank. But even among all this, he found enough courage to glare at the boy that was responsible for the failure of their mission, the boy whom they were sent to this village to assassinate. Why couldn't he have just simply died? But instead of that happening, they were riddled and puzzled by the blonde brat's tangling words and continuous chuckles. Oh, how he hated that chuckle by now, and trapping him and his entire team in a cobweb of utter confusion until a time when they were completely ambushed. But even amidst all this anger, he had to clear one confusion that was continuously nagging his mind since the very beginning, since when he met the son of the fourth. "Tell me," Brady asked through gritting teeth that he realized he doing in his rage, "did you plan all this? Did you lead us into this ambush?" Naruto just released a short breath and once again resumed in serene smiling as he looked back at Kuroku. The answer to that question would be yes and no, he answered the Iwa group leader with a calm smile. Kuroku furrowed his brows in confusion, while many raised their eyebrows at the riddle answer, yes and no. What did that mean? Naruto decided to interject their thoughts. You must probably be wondering what that meant. Well, it's pretty much simple. I had it all planned, but the plan was not even known by my parents or anyone else. At the questioning looks he got, even from his parents, he decided to continue. Well, to put it simply, I planned the whole situation in my favor. The moment I left the mansion, I knew that my mother would notice my absence in the mansion, and she would immediately notify this to my father. All this time of me conversing with you people was my plan of biding enough time for the ambush to take place. His explanation left everybody stunned as they tried to comprehend what the little blonde boy just said. It was so mature, so intelligent and so planned out that it was highly unnerving coming from a 6-year-old child. Heck, they were unable to believe that the one who said all this was a mere 6-year-old child. Kushina stared in shock at child in her arms as she tried to let the current situation sink into her brain. Her son, a 6-year-old child, planned out an ambush of an entire unit of Anbu-level shinobis without even his parents knowing about the whole affair. Was my child always this special? Was the incident on his birth not an accident? She thought to herself while still reeling in her shock. Minato on the other hand didn't know what he should feel. His mind was in such a complicated state that you could very well say that it slightly went into shutdown mode. When his mind did reboot, his almost took a step back in utter shock that his son, a 6-year-old child, was responsible for the capture of Anbu-level shinobi group of infiltrators without even his parents knowing of the plan. It brought such an odd sense of a combination of emotions. He was feeling utter pride in the fact that his son was so much intelligent and sharp-minded even at such tender age, while on the other hand, he was more shocked to his core for the very same reason that made him feel proud for his son. How could a 6-year boy be so much analytical and sharp-minded to such a level that is leagues above even the most jounins in his village? It was almost ridiculous. In the end, Minato shook his head and decided to settle with a proud smile directed at his son. "You are meant for great things, Naruto, I just know it," he thought with a proud smile. The other people, even including the captured shinobis, were left with their tongue twisted in their mouth for all the experiences that they had in the shinobi world. This was something that was just not comprehensible in any way you tried to look at it. Kuroku, in particular, was the one who expressed his shock the most on his face. No wonder, he thought with a stunned expression, no wonder Tsuchikage-sama was so desperate to assassinate this child, he is a serious potential threat. Even now, he was unable to form any form of coherent words, whether was it out of his fear of the legendary yellow flash standing behind him, or was it out his own shock-induced state, he didn't know, but one thing that he definitely knew, and was also confident that all the people present here would be agreeing with him. That the boy in front of him was no normal child and in future, would be no normal or average shinobi. Thanks for watch here.